Hello again, and thanks for spending a bit of your morning with me. Today I want to walk through a dozen herbs that earn their place in almost any garden, and I want to be straight with you about why, because this is a corner of gardening where the claims tend to run a long way ahead of the evidence. You'll hear people say a windowsill of herbs can stand in for a trip to the doctor. I'm not going to tell you that, because it isn't true, and I'd be doing you a disservice if I did. What I will tell you is that these 12 plants are genuinely worth growing. Most of them are lovely to look at. Most of them pull real weight in the kitchen. Several are magnets for bees and butterflies. And every one of them carries a long tradition of gentle, everyday use, the kind of mild comfort a warm cup of tea has always offered. Where the worst that happens if it doesn't work is that you've had a nice cup of tea. Where the research backs that up, I'll say so. Where it's mostly tradition and thin on trials, I'll say that too. And any time we're past mild and short-lived, a high fever, an infection, anything in a small child, anything that's frightening you, that's a doctor, not a garden. Keep that line in your head the whole way through and we'll get along fine. A couple of growing notes before the list, because they'll save you grief. A good number of these are perennials. Plant them once and they'll greet you every spring, which for my money is one of the great quiet pleasures of gardening. A few are annuals, but the generous kind that drop their own seed and come back on their own. And 3 of them belong to the mint family, which is a polite way of saying they'll take over your bed if you let them. I'll flag those as we go. When I do, the answer is nearly always the same. Grow them in a pot, or in a spot bordered by pavement, or a lawn you mow, where their wandering roots run into a wall. One more thing, and it holds for the whole list. I'm not going to tie any of this to a particular frost date or a hardiness zone, because you know your own climate better than I do. When I say plant after your last frost, or lift your garlic in summer, translate that into your own calendar. Let me start with 2 plants for the end of the day, because I think that's where a nervous first-timer should begin. The first is lemon balm. It's in that mint family I mentioned, so a container is your friend. But it's one of the most agreeable plants you can grow. Soft, lemon-scented leaves, happy in sun or part shade, forgiving of a gardener who forgets it. Give it a haircut a couple of times a season, and it'll stay bushy and keep pushing out fresh leaves, and it dries well if you want to keep some for winter. Brush past it on a warm afternoon and you'll catch the scent, and that scent is really the whole appeal. Lemon balm has a long history as a calming herb, a cup of tea in the evening to take the edge off a wound-up day. And here the evidence is actually fairly encouraging by herbal standards. Several small trials suggest it can ease mild anxiousness and help with sleep and mood. I'd lean on the words mild and small trials, because that's honest. This is promising rather than proven. But it's gentle, it's pleasant, and if a fragrant plant by the back door and a warm cup before bed helps you unwind, that's a perfectly good reason to grow it. Alongside it, chamomile. If you've ever bought a sleepy time tea, you've met it. The kind most people grow as an annual, but it's one of those obliging self-sowers. Let a few flowers go to seed, and you'll often find it turning up again next year without any help from you. Sow it on the surface, because it likes a little light to germinate, and give it a sunny, well-drained spot. The little daisy flowers are the part you want, and the more you pick, the more it makes. Chamomile has the same calming reputation as lemon balm, and again the research is modest but real. A number of trials pointing to better sleep quality and less anxiousness, with a very good safety record for most adults. It's the classic mild, end-of-day cup. I'll add one caution. Chamomile is in the daisy family, so if you're someone who reacts to ragweed or its relatives, introduce it carefully. And I want to be clear about something, because the old advice can get carried away here. Chamomile is a nice calming tea for an adult. It is not a treatment for a sick baby or a child running a fever. Whatever you may read, that's a call to the doctor. Grow it for your own evenings. Now peppermint, a third of our mint family wanderers, and the most determined of the lot. I mean it about the container. Put peppermint loose in a bed, and in 2 seasons it'll be in the next bed over, and the one after that, running along under the soil on those white traveling roots. In a pot it's a joy. Harvest it just before it flowers, if you want the strongest leaf, and divide the clump every couple of years to keep it vigorous. What's it good for? 2 things the evidence genuinely supports in a modest way. Peppermint oil, the concentrated form, in proper enteric-coated capsules, has reasonable trial support for easing the cramping of irritable bowel syndrome, and peppermint oil dabbed on the temples has some evidence for tension headaches. Now, a cup of peppermint tea from your garden is a gentler thing than those concentrated oils, and it's a lovely after-dinner settler. But I'll flag the safety point the research is firm on. Those concentrated oils aren't for infants or very young children, and they aren't recommended in pregnancy, so if you're expecting, enjoy this as an occasional mild tea rather than reaching for the oil. On a hot afternoon, a glass of iced peppermint tea is one of summer's small mercies, and that alone earns it a pot on the patio. Let me move to the kitchen shelf, because 4 of my 12 are herbs you may already cook with, and that double duty is exactly why I love them. Sage first. Ordinary culinary sage, a handsome, silvery, drought-tolerant perennial that will sit happily at the front of a bed for years and ask very little of you. It wants full sun and sharp drainage. It dislikes wet feet and heavy humidity, and it does get woody with age, so a light prune each spring keeps it productive. And you may want to start a fresh plant every 3 or 4 years. In the kitchen, it's an autumn staple. Its oldest medicinal reputation is for the mouth and the throat, and this one actually has a bit of trial support behind it. A sage gargle has been compared against a standard pharmacy throat treatment and held its own for easing sore throat pain. So a cooled cup of strong sage tea, used as a gargle, is a reasonable comfort for a scratchy throat, with the same proviso as always, that a sore throat with a high fever, or one that drags on, wants a doctor's eye in case it's something that needs treating. One note for the careful: use the leaves as tea, not sage essential oil taken internally, which isn't a good idea. Then thyme, another tidy, sun-loving, drought-tolerant perennial, and one of the best value plants in this whole list, because it's forever useful in the kitchen, and it flowers beautifully for the bees. There's a low creeping kind and an upright kind. Either works, though the upright is a little easier to harvest by the handful. Snip sprigs as you need them, and give it a trim after it flowers to keep it neat. Its traditional home is the chest and the cough. Thyme is rich in aromatic oils, thymol chief among them, and there's a fair thread of evidence that thyme preparations can ease a productive chesty cough, the kind that lingers at the tail end of a cold. A warm thyme tea with a little honey is a time-honored comfort for exactly that. I'll keep saying it because it matters. Comfort for a mild, passing cough is one thing. A cough with breathlessness, or a fever that won't quit, or one that hangs on for weeks, is a reason to be seen. Grow thyme for the kitchen and the bees first, and let the cough tea be a bonus. Oregano is the third of the kitchen crew. Same easy Mediterranean temperament, wants sun and sharp drainage, hates soggy soil, and rewards you on every pizza you'll ever make. If flavor is what you're after, look for Greek oregano, rather than the ornamental sorts. It packs far more punch. Cut it back through the season, and it stays bushy. You'll hear big claims about oregano, and I want to trim them honestly. It is genuinely rich in antioxidants, and its oils show real antimicrobial activity in the laboratory in a dish. That is not the same as saying a sprinkle of oregano fights off an infection inside your body, and it is certainly not, whatever you may have heard, a protection against cancer. There's no good human evidence for that, and I won't repeat it. What oregano is a wonderful, robust, useful herb that happens to be good for you the way most fresh green things are good for you. Grow it, cook with it, enjoy it, and let the grander claims go. Garlic rounds out the kitchen group, and every garden should have some. It's easy, it stores, and it's one of the few things on this list where cooking with it generously is the whole point. In most of the country, you plant the cloves in autumn for a summer harvest, and lift the bulbs when the lower leaves have browned off. The hardneck types tend to suit colder gardens, and the softnecks the milder ones, so pick to your climate. Garlic's best supported health story is a cardiovascular one. Across a number of trials, it appears to have a modest effect on cholesterol and a mild one on blood pressure. Modest and mild are the right words. It's a helpful part of a good diet, not a medicine. As for the old reputation as a cure for colds and infections, the honest read is that the evidence there is weak, so enjoy garlic for what it reliably is. A food that's good for your heart and makes everything taste better. And if you've got a real infection, a tooth, a wound, anything hot and swollen and getting worse, please don't reach for the garlic instead of a doctor. Now a quick one for the stomach. Dill. It's an annual, feathery and pretty, easy from seed, and itself sows readily if you let a few seed heads ripen. Sow a little every few weeks through the cooler part of the season, because it bolts fast once the heat comes. It's a pollinator favorite too. The flat flower umbels bring in beneficial insects, and it's a host plant for swallowtail caterpillars, which is a genuine treat to watch on a summer morning. Dill has a long, gentle tradition as a settler of upset, gassy stomachs, the carminative herbs, as the old books call them, and it's a mainstay of pickling, which for a lot of us is reason enough. The evidence here is mostly tradition rather than trials, and I'll be straight that some of the bigger claims you'll see pinned to dill aren't well supported. But as a mild after a heavy meal tea, and as the soul of a good pickle, dill has earned its patch. Let me turn to two plants for the skin and the scrapes of ordinary life, both of which happen to be beautiful. Calendula, the pot marigold, those cheerful orange and yellow daisies. It's an annual but a champion self-sower. Get it started once and you'll likely have it drifting through your beds for years. It prefers the cooler stretches of the year and keeps blooming if you keep picking, so deadhead often. And it's about the easiest seed there is to save, so you'll never need to buy it twice. It's a first-rate pollinator plant. The petals make a lovely natural dye and a pretty splash of color in a jar of tea, and its traditional use is topical for the skin. Salves and washes made from calendula have a long, gentle history for soothing minor irritations and small scrapes, and it's about as mild as topical herbs come. The formal research is thin, so I hold the claims lightly, but as a soothing, traditional skin herb that also feeds the bees and brightens the whole garden, calendula is an easy yes. Its companion here is yarrow, and yarrow is a gift to a low-effort gardener, a tough, hardy perennial that thrives on neglect, shrugs off drought, and throws up flat flower heads that pollinators adore. Give it lean soil and full sun, feed it too well and it flops, which tells you everything about how little it needs. It's one of the great pollinator plants, honestly worth growing for the insects alone, and the newer garden varieties come in beautiful soft golds and corals if the plain white isn't to your taste. Its oldest reputation is as a wound herb. The traditional name in some places translates to something like soldier's woundwort, used to help slow the bleeding of small cuts, and there's a long folk history of packing a scrape with crushed yarrow leaf. I'll give you the honest caveat, the tradition is real, but a deep or serious wound needs firm pressure and proper care, not a leaf. So keep yarrow in the minor scrape category in your mind. It's also turned up for centuries in fever and cold teas. Grow it for the bees and the sheer toughness of it, and treat the rest as the interesting history it is. My 11th is bee balm, and you may know it as monarda, or bergamot, or oswego tea. It's the last of our mint family spreaders, so again, give it room to roam somewhere it can't bully your other plants, or hold it in a container. Give it decent air movement too, because it can be prone to powdery mildew in a crowded, still corner, and there are mildew-resistant varieties well worth seeking out. Here's the lovely thing. Because those shaggy red and purple and pink flowers are so striking, a patch of bee balm left to spread just reads as a gorgeous flower bed, and the bees and butterflies and hummingbirds will thank you for it because there are few better pollinator plants going. Medicinally, it sits mostly in the traditional column. It carries some of the same aromatic compounds as thyme, and it has a history in soothing teas. But I'd be honest and tell you that if you grow bee balm, grow it first for its beauty and for the pollinators, and count any gentle tea as a happy extra. And I've saved a genuinely interesting one for last. Tulsi, also called holy basil. It's a tender annual in most of the country, so treat it the way you'd treat sweet basil. Start it after your frosts are well and truly done, or keep a plant going on a bright windowsill. It loves heat, and if you pinch out the flower spikes as they form, it'll stay leafy and productive longer. It has a wonderful clove-like fragrance that alone justifies a pot by the door. Tulsi is what herbalists call an adaptogen, a plant traditionally used to help the body cope with stress. And this is one where the modern research is actually building. A review pulling together a couple of dozen human trials found reasonably consistent signals for stress relief and for helping with blood sugar and cholesterol in people with metabolic trouble though. And this is the honest part. Most of those studies are small and short, and we're some way from firm conclusions. I'll add a real caution because it matters. Tulsi isn't recommended if you're pregnant or trying to conceive, or if you're on blood thinning medication. So it's one to talk over with your doctor before you make a daily habit of it. For a lot of people though, a fragrant cup of holy basil tea in a stressful stretch is a gentle, pleasant thing, and the plant itself is a delight to grow. So there's my 12. Lemon balm and chamomile for a calmer evening, peppermint for a summer glass and a settled stomach, sage, thyme, oregano, and garlic pulling double duty from the kitchen, dill for the pickle jar and the pollinators, calendula and yarrow for the scrapes and the bees, bee balm for sheer beauty, and tulsi for the fragrance and the stress of modern life. Notice what I've done there and what I haven't. I haven't promised you a pharmacy in your backyard, because that's not a promise anyone can honestly make. What I've given you is a dozen plants that are beautiful, useful in the kitchen, wonderful for pollinators, and carry the quiet comfort of long tradition, with the research laid out plainly so you can weigh it for yourself. And here's your one affordable thing to try this week, because I always like to leave you with something you can actually do. Don't try to plant all 12. Pick one, the one that speaks to your life. If you sleep poorly, a small pot of lemon balm or chamomile. If your stomach's touchy after dinner, peppermint or dill. If you just want the single most useful plant on the list, a pot of thyme by the kitchen door. A herb start from the nursery or a packet of seed will run you $1 or $2, and that one plant will teach you more than any list I can read you. Get it into a pot this week, put it somewhere you'll pass it every day, and let it earn its place. That's how every good herb garden I've ever known got started. Not with a grand plan, but with one plant somebody couldn't resist. Take care of yourselves. Be honest with yourselves about when something needs a doctor, and I'll see you next time.